Hello everyone, and thank you for joining us for today's presentation hosted by Jibestream, the premier indoor mapping platform provider, and Indoors, your professional indoor positioning system provider. Speaking today will be Jibestream CEO and co-founder Chris Wiegand and Indoors CEO and co-founder Bernd Gruber.
Excellent. Thank you, Jody, and very excited to be here today. Just a truly awesome response to this webinar, which tells us how much interest there is in the space and to learn more about what's happening in the industry. And always a pleasure to be here with my friend and colleague, Bernd from Indoors. Today's topic is Ultimate Checklist for Indoor Mapping Positioning Success. So we're going to go through a number of slides that we're going to be talking, also some live demos, and as Jody mentioned at the end, there will also be some questions. Be happy to open up and answer some of those questions. Just to set the landscape a little bit, this is such a fast-growing industry, as many of you know, but really the scope and scale of it is pretty tremendous. And looking at one of the most recent reports from Deloitte around this sort of technology, they predict that being able to locate people and objects will have an equivalent or greater economic impact than outdoor digital navigation. Just to say a little bit about how big that is and sort of how that applies to what we're doing, that represents about 0.4% of all of US GDP, which is over $70 billion. And when we compare that to how we've seen what the outdoor digital navigation has done to transform how we do things, not just personally, I probably get in a lot less situations where I could be wrong on maps and directions. I'm now following things like my Google Maps and I'm in a foreign city. But more importantly, the paradigm shift that's happened for industries like transportation, the ability to do location analytics is just massive. So when we look at how that's going to change what we do in the indoors, there's literally billions of assets that can be managed, and assets can be stationary or moving objects, people, things, about anything about your indoor space. Now, to accomplish that, the indoor maps is really a foundational layer to that. And a lot has changed even since we started. Actually, today is the 8-year anniversary of Jibestream exactly. We started on August 24th, 2009. And the way we looked at a map in the past was really as a static picture that we drew lines on to help people get from point A to point B. That now is really broken up into layers and objects, and everything being addressable, which again supports things like the a sort of cross-section of IoT use cases that we're going to talk about, because we can now connect through REST APIs as status and override and visualize things on maps that we never could before. Now, a key element to this, of course, is how Jibestream and Indoors work together to deliver on that full solution for maps and positioning. We've been working with Indoors actually for 3 or 4 years now on a wide variety of projects, starting with malls and hospitals, now getting into more industrial use cases. And really, it's a, when combined, a ready-to-go positioning solution that allows you to support really a multitude of use cases. And Bernd, this is a great point to hand it over to you and talk about what you've been seeing out there and some of the more exciting projects that we're seeing.
Sure, and thank you so much, Chris, for this great introduction. Also, welcome from my side. Hi, welcome from the Indoors part. What you just said is, the great thing is really about indoor mapping and indoor positioning. It is that it can fulfill a lot of use cases. Think about the digital mapping and indoor positioning part as really your base layer for a lot of use cases. So going from the asset tracking part, knowing where things are, knowing where people are, over to facility management and wayfinding. As you said, you've got now your 8th years anniversary. We're also about in this space now for over 7 years. And when we started, it was really about the wayfinding stuff. So thinking back in the early years we went to some clients and said, you need indoor positioning. And they said, yeah, that's true. But you know what? We don't even have a website. So now is really the time of when wayfinding and all these other use cases are picking up. So thinking not only about the wayfinding, think also about business intelligence, know how your things are utilized, warehousing, security, know where another aspect of asset tracking, know where things are, know where people are. And to give you also now a little bit of a more in-depth overview about some of the use cases, I'm going to hand back here to Chris.
Thanks, Bernd. So just as some sort of live demos here, I'd like to show, this is just a demo tool, and a great opportunity for us to sort of explain our positioning. Both Jibestream and Indoors, we are components to a whole solution, meaning that we have a software development kit for our mapping engine, the same for positioning, and those can be really embedded into any app to bring these different use cases alive. So, you know, we will certainly cover wayfinding, but I think the main point that Bernd was also covering is that, you know, this really started out as sort of a point solution of how do we get people to navigate a building more easily, which is certainly required, and we still do that every day. But it's really become more of a direct ROI, different operational use cases, and I'll just go through a few of those. But while we're here, I'll show you wayfinding. Again, this is an unstyled map, really just for developers to be able to use our software development kit and try different things and apply what they'd like to from there. So if I take a location in our office here, and a very common location would be the coffee machine, I have the opportunity to go there, either the accessible route, which I'll choose, and that's going to make sure that I don't encounter any stairs or anything like that. So it's going to take me through that. Of course, we'd have indoor positioning. If I was in the building, it would know where I am to start, and it gives me the directions, and that's a very basic wayfinding use case. Bernd also referred to some of the different utilization and how do we get the whole back end of analytics on certain things. So now that we have maps that are built, they really become the central source of truth for anything to do with mapping or spatial context. And I can say, show me a comparison of the utilization of teal in this other room, serene, and now I can use this to see, you know, sort of occupancy levels. So not just getting me to the room, but also when people are in that room, how many people are in it, or perhaps even, you know, what is the temperature of that room. And so this could become very useful in different settings, manufacturing, healthcare, through a REST API, being able to action different sort of parameters. So rooms are above or below the temperature they should be. And also maybe not coming through excellent over the webinar, but just some of these gestures that we're used to. We never want to lose performance or fidelity of a map, so we have a vector-based format that we use that allows us to continue with zoom and get any level of detail that you'd like to have of any particular map view. If we look at another very popular use case around asset tracking, we have the ability to look at different assets. Now, it doesn't really matter what the industry is. Another point of clarification is we're not creating this data coming from the assets. It's through a REST API. Essentially, we create an external ID for anything that could be on or visualized on the map, and then we're able to visualize that based on the API that's coming to us. So in this case, I may want to check the status of something before I go there. Say I'm a clinician in a nursing environment. This wouldn't be a great choice because the battery life is low. So again, this is information that's coming from that device. Even worse there, so probably ends up that the furthest one away is actually the one I want, and I can go ahead and get directions to that. So there's both a visualization and a navigation element to this, using both you know, positioning and maps to accomplish this. A couple of other use cases, very important in current environments, about security. So, you know, having the ability to address urgent situations. It could even be something like an active shooter, or it could just be routine tasks. So the ability to assign tasks and have you know, compliance that guard has actually gone to those doorways and whatever they're supposed to check. And then from the command center, if they need to create you know, a surrounded situation, perhaps they could do that essentially and have it show up at the guard level. Just another point of clarification, so taking the SDK of both Jibestream and Indoors really could be embedded into those independent apps that they might have for security or for asset tracking. Simple way of putting it is our slogan, putting maps in apps. And so it really leads us into what we'd call persona-based maps, meaning you're going to keep the same set of maps and all the benefits of having it centralized and updated in one place, but you're going to apply something different as a front-end user experience on the implementation side that allow you to have private or discrete experiences, could be for the public or perhaps just for staff. while we're here, just looking at some of the other innovations, being able to have a parking integration, so being able to see from a user perspective, I'm going to a certain location, where is parking available, green being available, red not. These are all, again, coming from, it could be even in the future, a predictive system, or something real-time, camera-based, sensor-based on-site. And last but not least, we're seeing a lot in terms of manufacturing, sort of the pick and pack, the ability to reorganize and optimize a route for somebody to have a number of different stops. So here we have stop number 1. This would be, again, in an environment where they need to pick up different items, scan that off, and then continuously optimize their path to where they're going. We have seen new use cases that are similar to this. Perhaps one that's coming to mind is in an airport, where custodians can be tracked where they are and sent to the most urgent situation, not just based on the path that they would have followed. Maybe they just left a restroom, but it's out of soap or out of paper towels, and they're redirected back there so that they're not going back to it hours later. They can be addressed in real time. So really, truly, the use cases are quite endless when it comes to being able to apply different use cases once you have indoor positioning and maps together. So I'm just going to take a second to go over to the back-end tools. And bear with me for a moment. So let's look at the view from an administrator. So this is our content management system for the mapping engine. This is what somebody would be given authority to use to make updates, role-based access depending on who you are and what access levels you should have. And just as a couple of minor points here, we see the map itself. This is a place that you would manage any changes, splits and merges, data management, setting up geofences. And we've had a huge amount of improvements over the last year with this platform, just making it more user-friendly. Again, after 8 years, we've really been able to be consultative with our clients and the administrators and see what they wanted and how to access that best. So we allow them to turn things on and off. So these are all our waypoints. Could be points of decision, amenities, things that are already mapped in the system. The navigatable pathways. So as we work together and we assign sort of those navigatable areas where people are allowed to go, or perhaps only certain levels of people, so security or different sort of use cases, we may or may not show all pathways to all users. And again, just show you a couple of different things here. Things like adding labels. So everything in our system is dynamic. We generally don't burn in things to the map. We want to make them so that they can rotate and zoom and be addressed individually. But in the case you did want to have a permanent label, this is where you'd manage that. So Chestnut Lane, and we can see that over here on a street. And then our people movers. So the ability to connect floors and have different nuances of those floors. We'd want to make sure that you can, some people movers or escalators only move one way. In an airport, they go one direction, or perhaps in a mall, just down or up. So we can all manage that and make sure the floors connect properly. And then we want to make it very user-friendly. So being able to drag and drop things, a defibrillator perhaps onto the map that's now there, or add a new destination. So why don't we pick on Barron's for a minute, and we can say Barron's office. Description could be head honcho. The external ID is really important because this is what's going to connect the REST API to an outside system for any updates. So let's make a fake one. And he's probably got a beer fridge in his office, I bet. So now I submit that. Those are the keywords that are going to come up when I'm searching, just like we do on Google or otherwise. And now I'm going to look for that. And it's in the system, but it's not on the map. So I'm sure he would get a corner office. Let's put him over there. And now it's there. And we could just as easily remove that or change that location as well. So that's from the administrator perspective. I know many of the people in the audience today are also developers as well. And because we do have software development kit for iOS, Android, and web, call this the front end to our software development kit. So where you can see how all the functionalities work, we provide sample map, sample code, all these sort of things. And I want to be able to, go in and see how the map behaves, perhaps for styling. So in this case, I'm going to pull up a map. And we're not just bad designers, or not bad designers here. We really made all these colors very distinct to show that they're all addressable individually. So we could have different colors for amenities. We can control anything about the look and feel. And I think the overall sort of theme between Jibestream and Indoors, if you are a developer designing a solution, this is going to give you maximum configurability and control. So for example, I'm seeing a blue map here. Let's make that look a little more Jibestream-ish. I'll just find the right place for that. And put in a new color code. So this is, again, as a developer, being able to, in a controlled environment, see how you, when you make changes, you could fork it off and run different sets of code. And now I should have a different result. Great, we've got a very red map. Keep in mind that could be on the implementation side based on a business rule. So if a room was busy or free or an urgent situation, it could be a temporary status, and you can apply rules that allow the color or the styling to change based on that. Literally everything to do with look and feel and behaviors can be done at the programmatic level. So we have clients that have hundreds of venues. If they want to make a branding change, stroke width, color, whatever it might be, that can all be done in a matter of seconds just with a change of code. One more thing I'd like to show is the different levels of visuals that you can bring up on the map view depending on the user, the use case. Here we have a high-level view of a map, and our goal is to really never overwhelm the user so that they're not seeing too much in a complex environment. But to give that ability, we can just set parameters or different sets of parameters, show things like the HVAC system. And really this is where it separates us from others in terms of the level of control. So in other systems, you may have the ability to have 3 or 4 different, sort of set zoom levels. Here, it's 100% open to configuration on what you want to show at what point. Going a little deeper onto the developer side, our Swagger active documentation here, it is all based on RESTful APIs and the ability to bring in and visualize data from a number of different sources. This will really open up the types of use cases that we've been talking about. So, having a look at all of the current REST APIs that are available, and maybe I get down to looking at your customer venue and your destination. So, being able to manage all of your destinations, and in the sense being here that there is a single source of truth, whether it is our content management system or a third-party content management system. We want to take away, the overhead of having to manually make changes, and this allows it to be all automated. So we can push or pull data from literally any system. And just very lastly and quickly, again, for the developer sort of audience, documentation is super solid for us, and we have examples of everything. So just looking at the web SDK documentation here and going maybe into asset tracking, because that's very closely linked to what we do with positioning. And being able to, again, go into something like styling, so getting everything that you need there in terms of the documentation. So lots to see there, and as a follow-up, if anybody would like to see full documentation, or I know we're going to talk about demos and things like that, there is a lot to see, and happy to set up some of that for you. So I'm going to turn it back to Bernd here just in a second, and we're going to do sort of the flip side of that on the positioning side. So Bernd, over to you.
Thanks, Chris. The things I want to show you, things I want to talk about is how do you actually set up your indoor positioning service? It is still a process where you have to get on site, but I think it will be interesting for you guys to see how we do things, as well as how you best set up your indoor positioning service inside your building without going through a lot of hassles. Maybe one thing up front, and we're talking about mapping, we're talking about the maps you cannot see. So these are so-called radio frequency maps. What Chris showed you were the visual maps, so the things people can see, and we're not talking about the radio frequency maps on top of which our technology works and can compute an indoor positioning, the so-called blue dot. For those who are unfamiliar with our technology, so indoors uses a combination of RF fingerprints with the sensors in the phone. So we compute the position on the phone itself, meaning it's 100% offline as well. The position itself is then presented to you as an XYZ, so a logical building coordinate, or a longitude latitude set, coordinate set, meaning the floor level. This coordinate computed on those RF maps, on those not visual maps, but the whole frequency maps you have inside of a building, is then displayed on top of the Jibestream SDK, on top of the beautiful Jibestream maps. When we started, or let's put it that way, we asked about 3 or 4 years ago our clients, what are your biggest challenges, or what are your biggest hurdles when implementing an indoor positioning service? And this is where we very quickly got the answer: the speed. So setup of indoor positioning service, they need time. So we put up our thinking hats, had a lot of those beers Chris just showed that are next to me in my office. And what we came up with is a so-called technology called SLAM, so Indoors Simultaneously Localization and Mapping. This means that if you're familiar with indoor positioning and you've maybe even done your own setup so far, you know what I'm talking about when I talk about fingerprints. This means fingerprints is like one position in the room has a different, or sees different signals, and based on those signals, then again, the indoor positioning is computed. And what we came up with is a technology that you just have to, or one of our guys, or you even, you just have to walk through a building once, and this enables you to set up the indoor positioning really, really fast. This means largely automated system. This is a really, really largely automated system that you just walk through the building, and all those different signals are recorded, sent to the cloud, and on the cloud we compute then the fingerprints, which means that this allows you real overnight implementations. When thinking about huge events, or when having a demo maybe on the next day, you can just go there, just place some beacons, or use the beacons that are already placed there, or use even the Wi-Fi, and then walk through the building, record all the data, send it to the cloud, run our SLAM technology, and boom, you've got a blue dot on top of your beautiful Jibestream maps. So this not only allows you overnight implementations, we do a lot of things additionally. So let's say your environment changes. I mean, Chris was just talking about airports. Airports are a 365-day construction site. So what we can do is the people that use our system, the people that use the blue dot provided by Indoors, are also a little bit of a, I would say, back channel, because what we do is we check if the indoor positioning still runs smoothly there, if the indoor positioning is still in place, or the environment changes. And we not only detect that, no, we also heal it. So using our Indoors Simultaneously Location and Mapping system, or as we call it shortly, the Indoors SLAM technology, we use the crowd to heal, we use the crowd to improve the service overall. And to give you some ideas of how good or how precise our technology is, on the right-hand side, you can see a so-called accuracy map that's computed by our system, and you can see that blue is good, red is, well, not so good. You can see that we have here an overall accuracy of below 2 meters. So that means that you can really fulfill all those use cases that Chris was just talking about beforehand, not only wayfinding, but also asset tracking. And what actually we do on top of all those crowdsourced data as well, you can see on the next slide. So on this slide, you can see all the real-time analytics that are provided through the system. So you're able to not only know how long people stay in specific environments. Please bear with me, this is all anonymized data. You know where people walk, you know how long they stay in specific environments, and you can even improve your layouts on top of those venues. These are some core analytics we provide to you, but have you also thought about maybe where do people search for things? So we've got clients like shopping malls or supermarket chains or electronic department chains, and they want to know where do people search for things. So we augment the search term. If someone searches in the app, where's the iPad because I want to check it out, we augment this with an indoor positioning, so they know where people search for things, and they can even improve on top of that. But don't only think about the analytics as something that has something to do with people. Think about it also about assets. So how and where are assets utilized? Where are machines, and where are the most or where, in which area of the building are they most used? So going into this ROI discussions, improving the utilization of things, this is really where we see things are picking up. And as Chris also said, I mean, we started with wayfinding, but think about the indoor mapping and indoor positioning piece really as your base layer. This is the base layer where you can provide on top the blue dot functionalities like wayfinding, but all those other beautiful use cases, asset tracking, security guard monitoring, all those things.
Yeah, no, Brandon, I can't say enough about, you know, sort of where it's been and where it's going and where it is today in terms of the use cases. You know, I guess it comes down to real-time, you know, actionable sort of business decisions that can be made, and even better if there are preset business rules in the IoT environment. I also don't want to skip over, and you described it very well, but knowing the pain firsthand here of where we were 3 or 4 years ago with the fingerprinting process, I think there's some emotional scars on some people that had to, you know, go around a mall. I remember the first one we did, and it was pushing a shopping cart, stopping every 10 feet. Somebody shows up with a beacon in their pocket, and you start all over again. So that's just such a tremendous door opener in terms of how fast we can deploy and what's possible. And also just wanted to add on another use case when we have positioning and analytics, visitor management, so in corporate offices, and, you know, having real-time alerts of when somebody has gone into an area maybe they don't have authority to. So, you know, we could talk all day long about, you know, sort of what's possible, and I think that's the exciting part. It's really up to your imagination once you take these foundational layers and you start to sort of brainstorm on what's the art of the possible. So next, Baron, anything else you want to add to that before I move on?
No, we can move on.
Great. So really, it's where do we begin? You want to, you know, start a project, and as you can tell already, there's moving parts involved to get to the end game. So we want to talk about how you're going to design and implement your location-aware apps. And by the way, you know, apps range from many different things and different mediums and devices. Manufacturing have, you know, hardened devices to your consumer-grade iPhones. It's really agnostic to where this can be used. And so the first thing we got to plan. I know it sounds obvious, but there is a lot of planning that goes into it, understanding what the whole solution is, who are all the players, what's the infrastructure we're going to talk about. But really, before you do anything, you need to digitize your space and centralize everything. So think of it as becoming a digital landlord of your space, and also knowing that there's several other parties, emergency responders, vendors, partners. Once you digitize your space and you're in control of maintaining that, you now can, through the software development kit and API, give that to anybody you choose to, and also maybe suppress private information. So you being in control of your own space digitally, perhaps airports are a good example where the airlines want to create their own, or Google wants to come in and do your space. You want to maintain control of the changes, but more importantly, the data. And so the first thing you have to do is we start with a CAD drawing, and we go through a process to make that into a SVG or vector-based file. And then really connecting to these third-party systems. So I showed you our Swagger page, you know, REST APIs. The idea being that we can go in and make changes very easily with the content management tool, but we don't really want you to have to do that. It's always best, because in enterprise deployments, there's literally thousands of changes going on. Those should be done on the fly and automatically. And I'll turn it over to the expert about enabling your indoor positioning system.
Yeah, that's where we come into place. So enabling the IPS, enabling the indoor positioning service, this means you set up the environment for your Blue Dot. What does this mean? So Well, first we assess the area. So we have a look at how does the building look like, because every building is different. Trust me. Are there thin walls, thick walls? How does the area look like? Where can you place things? What's already there? So maybe you already have like some beacons installed and you want to utilize them. So yeah, let's do this. On top of those things, then what we look into is how do you extend the use cases you already did. So if you don't take anything out of this webinar, please take this one thing, which is if you set up the ground layer, if you set up the indoor positioning and indoor navigation, indoor mapping space, you can have multiple use cases on it. Think about it like your location engine that you can provide to all of your internal customers as well as external customers. It's not only about the wayfinding, it's about multiple use cases. And this is then where really the ROI game comes into place. So drive your ROI, look into how do you want to improve things, what does the ROI look like, as well as which shareholders and stakeholders you can even provide with additional features, additional things that drive their business.
Yeah, so taking it from there, I mean, sort of we break it into, three sort of distinct phases of the project, project goals, which we'll talk about, planning and infrastructure requirements. So going into a bit more detail on that, we look at all the things, and some of this is, quite obvious, but it also needs to be addressed. And I think the key thing is really, what are we trying to do with the project? What are we trying to accomplish? What's the ROI? So, Baron and I see often, and thank goodness for all the innovators out there that want to just use the latest and greatest technology, but not starting with the technology build or what's available in technology and building use cases around that, but starting with the use cases and then applying technology. And I know, Baron, you've come across a lot of different things out there, and would you say that's a pretty common theme in terms of what you've experienced?
Totally. Yeah, totally. So again, thanks to all those innovators. But what we see is that as a project is really then successful if you have your use case and then you implement or you use based on this use case technology, which can be indoor positioning, which can be indoor digital maps. If you work the other way around, you might face some challenges. You might have some hurdles you cannot overcome, because going from a technology to a use case is never an easy sell as having a use case and then applying according technology to it. So if you want to go for it, please, I mean, we're all experts in our field. You can talk about, please talk to us about what type of use cases you want to have and which technology you apply, because it really depends on, and this comes from the indoor positioning player, it really depends on how you set everything up. So please talk to us about your use cases, then we see which technologies we apply to.
That's a great segue, Baron, we're going to open up a very quick survey poll to ask you what are the use cases you're thinking of when you put maps and positioning together. So I'll leave that open just for the next 15-20 seconds, and we'll see some of the results come in. Okay, so not any big surprises here. We've got still a lot that are wayfinding based, and that's great. That is a very common pain point. And then a huge number of people that are in asset tracking, followed by facilities management. So those types of use cases of maybe identifying where are the burnt out lights in the building, visualizing that on a map, and then what's the most optimized pathway to get to those as a service person, and that could apply to literally anything in any sort of different vertical.
Totally, and I think to add on this, Chris, I mean, you always show this beautiful things where people have lists of thousands and thousands of items, and you see, okay, list item 7012 doesn't work anymore. But well, this is kind of, it's nice information, but to place all of this information on a map, this is where really the benefit of all comes into place, because people are used to look at maps. People are used to okay, this one is red. Why is it red? Maybe I have to fix it. And not, oh, list item 12 doesn't work anymore. God damn it, I have to find it.
Yeah, exactly. So it's become more intelligent. Baron, why don't you take us through some of the project planning?
Sure, sure. So what really needs to be done is what is your project success? I mean, really define your criteria up front. So what needs to be done is also very interesting thing, because what needs to be done means how you set up the whole thing. So agree really on who drives what, who does what, goes into the key stakeholder part of who is available for what. I mean, one of the biggest delays we most of the time have, where do we get maps? So or what's the base we can work from? What's the format? How fast can you get them? And as well as who is in charge if something changes. Then the delivery, sorry about that, the delivery dates, schedule everything up front so you don't have any unexpected issues like, okay, we want to set up everything, but maybe the hardware or maybe the maps are not in place yet. Then look about also how and when your project is a success. I mean, Chris, this is something I think a lot of people scratch their head around, meaning when is my project a success, and define it up front. What do you, or what type of success criteria do you see most here?
Well, I think what we've sort of been consistent in seeing how many people are looking for wayfinding is, that experience of place. So having, making it a more seamless and taking the friction out of an experience from, people coming from home and navigating to a building and getting those right messages at the right time. And ideally, they, really don't even feel the technology. It's a sort of one thing to the next, and feels quite natural. That, I would call that the qualitative side, which can become quantitative when you look at U.S. healthcare system with HCAHPS scores and satisfaction scores. But because of the nature of all the things that we're talking about today with more IoT use cases, we can get much more quantitative about. So it could be, what is the utilization rate of this high value piece of equipment? Today in factory settings, a cart goes missing from the back of a chain of carts moving together. Where is it? What's its status? Where's the forklift? And what's its battery life? You'd be surprised with some of the types of assets and how expensive they are, how little we know about them in these indoor environments. So setting up the goals, and I think part of this is sort of related to the stakeholders as well, is success is going to mean different things to different people. So getting that defined up front, of course, people who are contributing to the budget, but this is also, often changing process pretty dynamically. So making sure you have buy-in for that and collecting sort of the common goals so that, at each milestone we can ensure that there has been the set, sort of success criteria that have been met. And those can change over time. Of course they will. And, the dynamic element of the technology allows you to make changes based on what's going on. So if something isn't working, like you said, maybe it's product placement in a store, based on where people are searching for things, maybe you move product and your success increases from there. So can't say enough about that, and it isn't, I'll leave it at, it's an evolving thing, but we certainly want to know right out of the gate what we're looking for. And we're going to go to one more poll here, open it up to the group, about sort of the duration or timing of when you're going to start your next project with maps and positioning. So I'll leave that open for about the next 10 seconds. All right, well, looks like about half the people are on the right call here for sure, because they're looking to do something in the next 3 months. Then we've got a lot in the next 3 to 6 months, and some planning out further from there. So not surprised, a lot of projects going on out there. And I think the difference today is also we've kind of gone through a lot of the education phase of what can be done in terms of use cases, and people now know what they're looking for and looking to execute. So that's wonderful to hear, and we'll certainly be following up with you to talk about it more. So moving on from there to the infrastructure requirements, this is obviously a critical factor. If anybody's built anything, I'm not quite a carpenter, but I've heard or I've lived by this, the measure twice, cut once principle would be, sort of really know what you're doing ahead of time, so that especially when we go to deploy on site, you've thought of everything, everything's been tested. We have a great ability now to do QA and demo environments, and there's really no excuse for something not to go well on site if we've done our planning. And talking to all the integrators. So, especially in complex environments, there's Wi-Fi providers, there's security, facilities managers that all have maybe a data set to be part of this. You need to talk to everybody and make sure that we have clear scope and understanding what people are doing. And there's nothing, today short of how easy it is to fingerprint a building. It's still great, if possible, to be on site to understand the realities of the complexities of the space from a wayfinding perspective to some of the things that we're going to consider when it comes to positioning as well. So infrastructure, once it's there, it can be reutilized for many different things, but we have to get it right first, and that will require a lot of planning. Part of what is the underpinning of our success between Jibestream and Indoors is really the consultative approach that we take as well. So you can't just take these technologies and automatically have them work. There's variables in each sort of project that are unique, and it's only through experience that we're going to be able to help you with that. And I did have a question that I'll address right away, just we'll get to them a little bit later further than that, but really what is the difference between Jibestream and Indoors and what each would provide on top of the other? Jibestream is really the mapping engine component, so anything that needs to be visualized, any of the metadata associated with the map, all of the sort of contextual pieces is Jibestream and the data management. We are receiving the indoor positioning from the Indoors SDK, meaning that it's going to pass along the X, Y, and Z, and we're going to visualize that, for lack of a better term, blue dot on the map. Aside also, in addition to that, all of the analytics that they provide, and when we bring them together, that complete story. So think of it as Jibestream being the mapping and visualization tool, and then all of the infrastructure that gives us location is coming from Indoors. We often have questions where one will think that we provide positioning and maps, or the opposite, and that's just a point of clarification for everybody. And while we're on infrastructure, Bernd, I want to pass it over to you.
Totally. Thanks, Chris. And as you were talking about infrastructure, I mean, this is really the most critical piece most of the time, because infrastructure means potentially setting up additional things. I mean, when we assess a building, when we look at a building, how to set up our indoor positioning piece, so basically the blue dot functionality, we look what's already there. Maybe you do already have some BTLE, some iBeacons installed, or you've got some Wi-Fi and you only want to use it for Android because, as we all know, Wi-Fi does only work, the IPS does only work on Android using Wi-Fi only. So let's say you already got beacons deployed, or let's say you only got beacons deployed in certain areas. Well, what we can do is we can assess them, we can have a look on how good the infrastructure already is, and then place additional ones, or even go a step further and look into, based on, again, on your use cases, what type of beacons you want to use. Is it an outdoor, is it an indoor play? Do you have maybe, or do you maybe want to go with some beacons that are wired? Or can the beacons be placed into the lighting? Or is your Wi-Fi environment able to provide also iBeacon BTLE packages? So this means that Indoors, we itself, we're a software company and we really like to be one, but sometimes we have to get into the hardware play and see what's already installed in your buildings or in your clients' buildings, and even on top of then place some additional things. Then you've got the mobile piece. So our SDK, as Chris just said, it's an iOS, Android, and Cordova SDK. It can be easily integrated into already existing applications. And what this means is the SDK itself works 100% offline. So let's say you're in a parking garage, or let's say you are in an area where you don't have any cell phone reception. We can still provide you with the beautiful blue dot on top of the amazing Jibestream maps. So this enables you the blue dot experience. The cloud infrastructure itself, so when talking about the indoors cloud infrastructure, this is where all the automated stuff happens. This is where the smart happens in terms of setting up maps in a very, again, radio frequency maps in a very, very efficient and easy way. And then you've got the web overview where you can then interlink with all those great Jibestream functionalities. So Indoors provides you with the blue dot based on iBeacons and based on various other things like the sensors within the phone. But what we clearly say is we are not a hardware company. We help you find the right hardware. We help you find the right infrastructure in order to provide you with the best blue dot in class. And saying this, I'm going to hand over to Chris so he can explain you why the Jibestream maps are really the top-notch maps on the market.
Great, thank you. And I think we're able to be as good as the implementation that we're put into, which allows us a lot of freedom in terms of going horizontal and being in some world-class applications. For example, Westfield Retail Solutions, General Growth Properties. Between them, we have hundreds of properties and soon to be many more globally. Our mapping engine has been with many different types of apps, healthcare, industrial, corporate, and retail seem to be the most common, but every day there's new ones coming. And that sort of leads us into how it all works. And I want to kind of clarify again that Jibestream is a mapping engine component that's delivered through a software development kit. So the actual end user experience, once we've taken your CAD drawings or DWGs and converted them into web-friendly format, vector-based file, we're going to bring it into our system and manage all of the metadata, combine or integrate the APIs. But then that package, along with the indoor positioning from Indoors, is going to be embedded into a third-party app. Again, at the same address, there could be one for security, for facilities, a different one for visitors. And that's really up on the sort of implementation side of how that looks and feels. And for each one of those different implementations, or personas as we call them, you might integrate different data. So for the visitor, you have parking data. For the facilities manager, could be asset tracking. So lots of possibilities there. And just wanted to re-clarify that it provides sort of that maximum control, being able to define that front end. We're not giving you a point solution of something that's all put together front end, back end. So, Baron, we've been at this together a long time, and we've had successes and failures and moments of all kinds over that time. And I think that's really some of the value of what we can share. I'm going to let you sort of take us through the highlights and lowlights, perhaps, of what we've seen in the industry and how to use that to our advantage going forward.
Totally. Thanks, Chris. So what learnings and tips we can give you from an indoor positioning success perspective? It's really about future-proof your organization. So the industry is exploding across all different use cases, and now it is really the time to start implementing, to play around with all the indoor positioning and mapping things. So start testing now, start piloting now, pick an easy use case and enable the IPS and indoor positioning service inside your organization. Why? Because, I mean, to be frank here, enabling an indoor positioning service is not as easy as, I don't know, embedding a YouTube video in your website. So it is really something that has its complexes. It really has something that can be challenging, but you know what? Learn from it and see how you can best adapt all those functionalities inside of your organizations. And that's why get informed. So the industry really suffers from time to time from bad installations and bad technologies, or people that promised something and that were never fulfilled. So if someone says you will get sub-meter level of accuracy all the time using, I don't know, a beacon per room, this is not possible. This is from a technology as well as from a physics point of view, not even possible. So really get informed, talk to experts, talk to people who can give you a broader picture and tell you what's really possible and whatnot, leading to find your use case with a real ROI behind it. I mean, we just said it beforehand, but do not implement the technology for having the sake of having a technology implemented. Have a really profound use case and build on top of it, which leads to look at the bigger picture. I mean, maybe start with a small use case, or maybe even start with, I don't know, maybe a proximity-based type of positioning. So start with one use case and then extend to others. But also, and what we said before is, maybe start with a small, or maybe start with a pilot in one mall, start with a pilot in one part of your building, but always have in mind of what you want to achieve and what use case you want to do, and how you can extend it then to a bigger scope. Which brings me to know the team that you'll be working with. I mean, Chris, we've together been now in this industry for more than 15 years, if you sum it up. We've seen a lot of things. Thick walls, thin walls, everywhere glass, no glass, in tunnels, in, I don't know, even in airplanes, in moving objects. So we do have a lot of experience we can share with you. We do know what works and what doesn't work. So really know your partners, know your industry partners, which hopefully Jibestream indoors are. Again, we've seen a lot, and you can build on top of this knowledge. You do not have to be like the first guy who ever implements an indoor positioning and navigation service. No, you can talk to us, we can consult you, we can help you finding the right use case. Then on top of and leading from this use case, picking the right technology, and then starting with realistic approaches and implement the whole thing. So really, we're here the experts. Talk to us, we're really happy to help you.
So how it applies to you, get a personal demo. So, you know, really each use case and each situation is completely unique. We want to be able to talk to you between our two companies, which we really have done a lot to make a very unified approach and be able to address a specific pain point. So I showed you some demos today. We would definitely be able to go further and look at more. We also respectively have software development kits that we can expose and share with different people. So, you know, give us a call or an email and let us know how we can help. And I would love to take it from there. We do have a few more minutes, but, you know, really happy to have shared all of this with you today.